As I sit here today pondering what has happened to this once great nation of ours. The United States of America has always been a symbol of hope for people all around the world. That's why you get people from other countries who come here both legally and illegally, which is another issue. But my thought is, what has happened to the America that I grew up in? Now, we always try to romanticize the time when we grew up as opposed to today, but while some things have improved, in others we've gone backwards. We have become a nation of people who are offended by everything. You have people who are on the political left, and I don't mean all of them, but I will use the extremists, because there are extremists on both sides, and extremism on either way is not good. But the extremists on the left are encouraging people to react to things because of their feelings. Not saying that feelings aren't important, but there are times you need to get over your feelings, and as we are today. Today is our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Some people would not know he was the 16th president. And that's another issue as well. But during his administration, he fought to keep this great nation together. When we were coming at ways to fall apart, he was doing everything in his power to keep it together. And as the Civil War, as some say the war between the states, concluded, it was his goal to welcome the southern states back to the Union and do everything he could to rebuild us as a nation. Of course, John Wilkes Booth changed all that. So instead of his dream of bringing us back together, his Vice President Andrew Johnson went a different way. Now, it took a long time for us as a nation where we gave rights to women, to blacks. I don't use politically correct terms because they're more racist than just saying the color of somebody. If I say black or red or whatever, those are description terms. They're not meant to be derogatory. But we had TV shows and movies that not only made fun of but educated us on how stupid things like racism really is. You had shows like All in the Family, where you had the main character, Archie Bunker, who was a bigot. But if you watched the whole series, you could see how he progressed as a human being. And then the spin-off show, The Jeffersons, George was pretty darn bigoted himself. And he liked to use the H word, honky, when describing white people. A few years back, they did a series of specials in celebration of Norman Lear, who produced these shows. And they they brought in big names to play certain performers, certain characters, and they each did different episodes from different of the shows. And of course, back in the 70s, they really weren't even as bad as they are now when using certain words, if they are used in a certain context. On All in the Family, Archie would describe his black neighbors as colored. That was the politically correct term at the time, was colored. He never used the N-word. But on the Jeffersons, George, especially if another colored man was trying to make a play on Louise, would call him the N-word. When they did this special show in honor of the producer, they, of course, bleeped out the M-word. Of course, you could see the actor saying it, but they bleeped it out. But when it came to the word honky, which is supposed to be an offensive word to white people, they didn't leave it. They left it alone. Didn't touch it. We also had one of the best movies to explore this topic, which was Blazing Saddles. And it just, it's hilarious. They made fun of everybody. But they did it in a way that, you could see how stupid that these people are who are racist. But you couldn't make that movie today, just like in real life you could not make All in the Family with the Jeffersons, because of certain words that people use. We have gone from an era where we had the President of the United States trying to do everything that he could to keep our country from falling apart, gone from the United States of America to the divided States of America. Every 4th of July, people bring their flags out and they put them on their houses and they do whatever. I have a dear friend of mine who, she has a palette and it's painted like the American flag. And the one year she had this out, and it was sometime after 4th of July, somebody asked her when she was going to take it down. They said, well, the 4th of July is over. These people who are offended by our standards, Old Glory, they don't really understand what that piece of fabric means. They know it's a symbol, but they associate the symbol of our country with our government, which is two separate things. Am I always happy the way government does things and I don't care who's in charge? No. That flag, which I served under in our military for over 8 years, does not represent the government. It represents us, the people. So when you see people who are throwing mud on it and stepping on it and burning it, they're not defacing the government. They're defacing you and I. You got football players who, in protest of things like police brutality, they kneel during our national anthem, and as a soldier once said in response to Colin Kaepernick, when he did it, that he has a right to do that. Yes, he does. But here's a man who says he's trying to call attention to a certain issue. But I never once in an interview saw him talking about this issue. When you do things like kneeling during the national anthem, and I don't care what some veterans say, this is me talking, you're disrespecting every person who has ever put on a uniform to fight for our freedom. And also, when I was in school, we were taught to respect those in law enforcement. There was a program when I was in elementary school called Officer Friendly, which was to teach our children to respect the law. And if the police officer is your friend, if you are lost, this person will help you get home, will protect you. Well, we know in some areas, in some neighborhoods, they're taught to fear the police, which doesn't help any matters. So now, because of certain individuals who are using excessive force or doing things stupid, you got groups who are calling for defunding the police, which makes no sense at all, because if you're doing that, you're inviting anarchy. When George Floyd was killed, you had Democratic governors and mayors who were encouraging their constituents to get out there and peacefully protest. And this was going on during a national pandemic when we were told to stay home. And these people, some of them were protesting peacefully, but there was a lot who didn't, and riots came out. Buildings were destroyed. People were injured and killed because their leaders told them to get out there and protest. And I have nothing against the peaceful protest. I really don't. There are people who did peaceful protests during the civil rights movement. And under the guidance of Martin Luther King, they did just that. They protested, but they were peaceful about it. And because this upheaval, which was done in this peaceful way, we made progress, and our Civil Rights Act was passed. But now we got people on the radical left and radical right. The radical left is telling you that we are to be tolerant of all peoples, their beliefs, their views. But yet, if you disagree with what they're saying, you might be able to tolerate them, but you might disagree with what they're saying. Now they're being intolerant to you. I just saw a message online where a man was out at Mall of America and he was wearing a t-shirt which says, "Jesus saves." A security guard at the mall asked him to remove his shirt because somebody was offended by it. Really? If you don't agree with what that shirt says, don't look at it. There are a lot worse things that if you're walking around the mall or any place, you're going to see somebody with something else which is going to be far more offensive than that. I mean, look at our television programs. There's some shows which seem like they are doing their level best to creep over that line. I did a paper in English class when I was in college, my first semester in college, after I got out of the military, where I got my degree in education from Tennessee State University, which is a historic black university. And I did a paper how this was in the late 90s. And the paper was about how at that time we had several shows which were they were actually attacking the role of the father. And there were three which I mentioned. The first one was, of course, The Cosby Show. We won't go into Bill Cosby himself. That's another issue. But they're talking about the show itself. It represented a middle class, or maybe slightly higher than middle class, black family. And where the character of Dr. Heathcliff Huxtable is a noted obstetrician. But when it came to repairing stuff around his home, they made him incompetent. He thinks he's doing okay, but he always messes up. Then you have Home Improvement, where the lead character, played by Tim Allen, has a show on cable TV called Tool Time, which deals with tools. But he's ultra macho and ultra aggressive when it comes to tools, more power. And, but yet, this man who, if you follow the show, had before he began his show, he was a successful tool salesman, but yet he was not good at using tools. Every time, the running gag is on his show or in the personal life of his character, he was blowing stuff up, getting burned, falling down off the roof. Again, they made him incompetent. And lastly, you have the animated show The Simpsons. Homer Simpson who is basically how he landed the job of safety inspector at the nuclear plant. I would like to see an episode of that. But he is constantly messing up. Is this how America sees the male patriarch of the family? There are many homes where they would love to have a father who for some reason had died, or the parents got divorced, or they just up and left because they couldn't handle it. But they decided to make being a father a joke. And now you got people on the left who want to take away the titles of father and mother and want to call your biological mother the birthing person. Have we just completely lost our mind as a country? We are letting the 1% of the radical left tell us how to do things? If we are, we need to change direction because we're falling apart. And lastly, on this rant, I'm going to add one final thing. And that is, this is currently Super Bowl weekend, which I know a lot of people will still watch it even if their team is not on, because they want to see who the best team was. I'm not watching it. It has nothing to do with politics or whatever. It's just simply because my team's not in it, and so I don't care. But I saw something today, is that they are doing 3 shows, 3 performances. 3 singers are going to sing before this game starts. You have one person who is singing our national anthem. Then there's another person who is singing America the Beautiful. And then you have one more person singing what they call the Black National Anthem. Really? First of all, why do you call it that? Because you don't like people using terms like black or white or any other nationality. But they call it the Black National Anthem. And this supposedly started 3 years ago. If you want to fix things in this country, you don't do things to further separate us. If you feel that you need a song just for you because the one we have that talks about the whole country isn't good enough for you, I don't know what to say. People, we need to be thinking with our heads and with our hearts, not about feelings. How you feel. Because that is just not how it works. We went from being the leading country in the world to now being the laughing stock of the world. Our greed has taken jobs out of this country and put them overseas where they can be performed for pennies. All the American worker wants is just make a decent living. And that doesn't mean every time things go a certain way, you raise the minimum wage. We have to think what our good Lord above would want us to do. And we are definitely not doing it. If you are offended by a flag or a t-shirt which mentions God and God's Son, there is something seriously wrong with you. And it just, people, we just need to turn things around. I look at how things are going, and there should be no reason why gas prices are the way they are. Not when you have the president who we have access to a pipeline and the president says we can't use it. So we have to bring it over on ship. And then on top of that, from our national reserves, we sell from our reserve a staggering amount of oil to the country who have us in debt. And maybe someone could answer one final question for me. I remember back in the 1980s, or under the guidance of President Ronald Reagan, the United States had loaned, did not give, had loaned millions of dollars to various countries. My question is, did they ever pay it back? And if not, why? God bless.